we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health, and they're absolutely connected.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, I'm excited to welcome Matt Spear to the podcast. Matt is a former college soccer head coach at Davidson College, in addition to several other roles in soccer and sport, which you'll hear more about in our conversation. In this episode, we talk about lessons learned as a head coach, Matt's personal journey and struggles with depression and anxiety, mental fitness, and what he would do differently in his coaching if he could go back. On a personal note, I really respect Matt's authenticity and honesty throughout this conversation. I think you'll find some value in what he shares and his personal struggles and journey. If you enjoyed this episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. And coaches, we wrapped up our first annual summer coaching series, and you can still get access to the video replays, audio-only replays, coaching notes, and more from all 12 sessions at summercoachingseries.com. You can check out the incredible lineup of guests we had and what other coaches had to say about their experience. That's summercoachingseries.com. And one note about this episode before we hop in. This conversation was recorded live at a coaching convention, so there may be a bit of background noise at times. But we did our best to edit the audio to bring you the highest quality possible. Now to my conversation with Matt Spear. Enjoy the episode. Coaches, really excited to welcome Matt Spear to the podcast today. Matt, thanks for joining me, and I'd love it if you just started off and just shared a little bit about your coaching journey and background in sports.
Thank you, Luke, for having me on the show today. I'm excited to speak with you and be of service to those that may hear this. Matt Spear, grew up in North Carolina, grew up kind of the shadow of Wake Forest, a big HCC sports fanatic, and it inspired me to want to be a student athlete and eventually work in sports in some shape or form, which I have my whole career. Coaching-wise, after I finished my playing career at Davidson as a Final Four participant in 1992, I coached during my 20s, during the 90s, part-time, just youth, club, did a little bit of volunteering with the Davidson College team, but that was during my sports marketing career where I was doing a lot of TV and internet and print projects for Adidas and otherwise. Age 30, I turned into coaching full-time, got the head coaching gig at my alma mater, NCAA Division I school, Davidson. Quite a thrill to coach, the place that was in my DNA. One of my older brothers, Michael, played for Davidson as well. And I inherited the job from my, mentor, hero, Charlie Slagle, and did that for 18 years. Time flew by. Loved being a college coach. It was an experience that I would never, ever pass up again. I started from the bottom in terms of the knowledge. I had not been a full-time coach. So my path towards becoming an NCAA Division I coach was different than most. And I appreciate the time and effort and just the resources that most people have to put into it. I was so fortunate to get that job at age 30 and not have been a full-time assistant before. So I had a lot to learn. I knew Davidson through and through. I knew how to sell Davidson. I knew the value of Davidson education. I knew the people and the mission. But the actual coaching was a challenge at first. So I quickly did all the coaching licenses as fast as I could. U.S. Soccer, C license, B license, A license, back to back to back. And those really gave me a lot of methodology and understanding of running a session and being a leader of a soccer program. I also did the then NSCAA, now United Soccer Coaches, all the way up through their premier diploma. So I did that for 18 years and walked away from coaching 3 years ago just because other opportunities came up. We'll talk about that, but really proud of coaching at Davidson. We had some success on paper in terms of 10 wins over ACC teams and took the squad out to challenge great programs, Stanford, UCLA, Ohio State, Maryland. Love to put Davidson out there to try to be a giant killer, so to speak. And also really proud of the coaching staff that I was able to learn from and hopefully help mentor as well. 9 of whom became NCAA head coaches after Davidson.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, actually, I'm curious about one thing. You talked about how you really took over as head coach of this program without the typical journey to get there. And what were some of the hardest lessons that you maybe had to learn because you didn't walk that typical path of maybe grad assistant, like that typical journey that a lot of coaches take before they get that head coaching opportunity? You didn't have some of those experiences. Yes, you were coaching kind of on the side, but what were some of those really hard lessons that you had to learn when you got thrown into being a head coach?
Well, one thing I know is that a head coach can't focus on being liked. He has to focus on being respected. And I think a lot of head coaches, and maybe me at age 30, was worried about the guys liking me, and agreeing with me and appreciating me. And you have to quickly get past that ego. The person at the top of any kind of organization has a massive degree of decision making and stress, and that's hard. And you have to listen to people around you, but ultimately you have to make the call. And so, one thing I had to work on is I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. Not everybody's going to like me. A small, component of that is I didn't play with the guys. I didn't jump into training. When I had been a volunteer assistant or a head coach of a youth club team, I was jumping in all the time and playing in the practices and in the games and having fun with the guys. But as a head coach, I pulled back, and watched the sessions and evaluated. Definitely let my assistants jump into play as well. But it is a player's game, and I really believe that.
Yeah. What were maybe some of the lessons you had to learn when it came to leading the coaching staff? Again, you get thrust into this role, and you haven't done that before. What were some of the key learnings for how you managed and led the other coaches?
One suggestion I would have to anybody that's a leader, and frankly, we're all leaders. We're all models of excellence, which is being super present and doing the best you can on that given task and that given day. And we're all ambitious, right? So I think we're all leaders. I really tried to not call my staff assistant coaches. They were coaches just like me. We had some different roles. I tried to involve them. I try to surround myself by good people in my life. I've been looking forward to this podcast with you, Luke, because I've heard some of your sessions. I've looked at your website. I'm like, that guy is a sharp dude. I am going to pick up some things from him for sure. And same thing with the United Soccer Coaches Convention that I'm here with you in Kansas City currently. I gave a session yesterday, but I've rolled up my sleeves and gone to sessions the rest of the day that I can learn from others. And so the coaching staff, to me, was pivotal because we're part of a team, we're part of an organization. I'm not a top-down guy at all. I like to lead from grassroots. I'm a servant leader. I, have a lot to do with culture and vision and strategy, but we're all in this together. We're all stronger together. And so, for example, I kept then, if you want to call it, the assistant coach, rather than push them away. A lot of people come in as a head coach and push all the staff out and bring in their own crew that love them and like them, if they maybe agree with them. That guy, Todd Herman, is still one of my dear best friends, still in the coaching world. He coaches on the women's side now at Western Carolina University. And he is just a great tactical mind. And I knew that I wasn't a tactical mind. So those in the soccer world will know this name, but I'm not a Pep Guardiola, coaches at Man City. And before that, among other teams, Bayern Munich and Barcelona. I'm not a great tactician. And I knew that. And Todd is. And so you surround yourself that can complement your weaknesses and make the whole team better. I'm a big believer in 1 + 1 = 3. If you surround yourself by the right people and you inspire them and let them grow and learn with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there. Two things. One, to avoid the top-down approach with your staff, to make it collaborative. And then also what you were talking about with recognizing where you might not be strong. And I've heard some people refer to it as like staffing your liabilities, right? The areas where I know I'm not strong yet, I can get better at, but also I probably need someone that's really good at that thing. And I probably need to just empower them and let them do that job. I can't remember who it was, but I was talking to another coach. I think he was a soccer coach who just said, there was an assistant that I had that was such a skilled teacher, and I just let him teach anything new. Like maybe it was my idea, maybe it was someone's idea. We'd go over it together, but he was the one that was going to deliver it. He was a much better communicator, much better teacher than the rest of us. And we knew it, the players knew it, and people respected that. And we were honest with the players about it. We just said, hey, this coach, he's the one that's going to teach because he's better at it right now. And I think there's some power in that, of just being clear and empowering people in the areas that they're strong in.
Amen. Great people around you can get the heck out of their way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, tell us then a little bit about your transition out of coaching and kind of the difficult journey that led to for you personally with your mental health and mental well-being.
Absolutely. I think vulnerability is a superpower, and being authentic as a leader is critical in this new kind of modern leadership principles that I really try to preach and activate and spoke about here at the convention yesterday. So after the 2018 season, my 18th season coaching an alma mater at Davidson, we had a good season. The place was in a good space. I felt like I could leave it to good people, good players, good athletic department, super college, everything. And I was wondering what's next in my life. And, as serendipity happened, something fell in my lap. Again, something I wasn't qualified for. And I'm a big believer that if you are given an opportunity, don't overthink it, throw yourself into it and learn. You can do it. You can figure it out. And I think, a lot of people are scared of making a move or making a shift in their career. And I actually really enjoy it. So what happened was 5 of my 1992 Final Four Davidson College teammates bought the Richmond Kickers, which is a pro soccer team in Richmond, Virginia, plays in the USL League One, which is third division pro soccer. So those are not in soccer. I liken it to AA baseball. Basically, you got Major League Baseball, AAA, AA, single A. Soccer is similar. The teams aren't necessarily affiliated with the Major League team like baseball is, but that's the level, third division. So pro soccer. And they needed someone to come in and really try to turn this thing in a new way. It was a storied franchise that was in down times in many ways. And they asked me to be the president and general manager of a pro soccer team. And I said, what the heck? I'm going to do this. And so I started that in January 2019. And it was hard. It's hard because, first of all, I've been doing the same job for 18 years. And you get in a lane, you get in a pathway. I worked a mile from home. I love my family. I love my dog. I love coming home for lunch, and didn't realize how much I love those things until they weren't there. And I decided not to move my family. So I drove 300 miles twice a week, 49 straight weeks in 2019 to Richmond, Virginia from Davidson, North Carolina. Not a great driver. I decided that in terms of those distances. Never had done that before. And so a long commute, so to speak. And the job was hard, really was, Luke. I was out of my comfort zone to the point where it was scary. And, I like to roll up my sleeve and try to learn. But again, it was more than I thought. The team was really bad. The stadium was literally crumbling. There was some really bad mojo, culture, toxicity in the front office. The league that they jumped into was a brand new league. And so there was lots of growing pains in that league, lots of unknowns. So professionally, it was very hard. Then personally, lots of setbacks started to really kick in during that first year, serving that position in Richmond, 300 miles from my house. Number one, my college roommate died from cancer in the spring. Then that summer, my college coach died, who not only was my mentor, but also my first hire when I went to Richmond. We had stayed connected my whole life since, the late 1980s. And I hired him as my vice president of community development. And he was perfect at it, absolutely perfect at it. Charlie Slagle was his name. And so that was hard. It was sudden. I talked to him an hour before he died.
And he was working with you at this job that you had taken.
Absolutely. Yep. I talked to him an hour before he passed away, collapsed. And, I found out. And one of the things that was really hard about that was I had to tell the staff 2 minutes after I found out from a phone call from his son. And I had to walk in. And, when you're a leader, I didn't mourn. I didn't grieve. I tried to put on a good face, and that weighs on you. And I've learned that you have to go through pain, you have to express grief. And my dog died. My mom fell. Her health dwindled. She's okay. The team was lousy. Professionally, the team wasn't very good. I ended up having to let the coach go, and that was really hard and challenging. So just a really tough year. And at the end of that 2019, my marriage disintegrated. And it was sudden and abrupt and painful and hard. So I experienced that was a tipping point for me. Early 2020, entered deep, dark depression. Had never experienced severe mental health challenges, have had hard times like we all have in our life. But it was something different. And I didn't really understand it. And so I did go to a therapist. I did start medication, but I had to pull back. My brain was foggy. The synapses weren't connecting. I was in pain. I was frustrated. I was in despair. I'd fallen out of love with life, Luke, and I had a panic attack during that moment. So the spring of 2020 was just a crescendo of just inner turmoil. And then the pandemic starts. So it doubles with that. That summer, George Floyd is murdered, Black Lives Matter movement, and then the political unrest on the heels of that with the election. So 2020 was just so hard and pivotal in civilization's history. Nothing like this has ever taken over the entire world, the pandemic. But for me, I also had a ton of internal strife going on, which was tough. And I did muscle through that 2020 second season at Richmond, but I did it remotely primarily. Um, and I entrusted the people that I'd hired up there, which I had great people there. I told them what my challenges were. There's a lot of love shared back and forth with that. And I would encourage people, among other things, is seek help. Don't feel like you're doing this alone, and recognize. We'll talk more about mental health and what I really champion now, called mental fitness. But we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health, and they're absolutely connected.
Yeah, Matt, I appreciate you sharing that and being honest and transparent. That's a shitty year. Yeah, and all those things on top of each other, I think they would push anybody to the brink. I'd love to just know then moving from there, and I guess where you are now, and some of the things that you really feel like you learned through that hard season, that hard journey, because like you said, we all go through those kinds of things. And I think, especially coaches that are in a demanding profession that requires so much time and energy and emotional capacity, relational capacity. Yeah, I think most of us experience seasons, maybe not that extreme, but really difficult seasons. So I just love to know what you really learned through it.
Yeah, thank you. It was transformative for sure. And a couple things. One, in the summer of 2020, I realized not only how hard the first half of 2020 had been, but that I needed to transition. I need to be proactive. And so, first thing I did was decide that 2020 season was going to be my second and last season at Richmond, serving that. But I want to get through that fall season, and we had a great season. Our team went from second to the bottom of the league my first year to second to the top in the second year. We did $2 million of stadium improvements, hired tons of great new staff, new coach, new general manager, new chief operating officer. We brought in more investors. So I was happy with what we had done from year one to year two. And that was important to me, to leave it in a better place than I got there. And got my own townhouse, became a single dad, started to go, okay, I get on my own 2 feet. I can make this transition. And so I think it's a lot of self-belief, a lot of sharing, a lot of family support, a lot of reaching out to close friends. Luke, you'd be shocked on how many people I told my story. And not only do they lean in and appreciate hearing it, they go, Matt, let me tell you about my story. And so just men in particular being open about sharing struggle is something I'm really passionate about. At the end of that 2020 fall season, I walked away from Richmond Kickers and decided to start my own consultancy, and named it aptly Love United FC. FC stands for football club. People in the soccer world will know that. It's kind of a soccer term. And with the idea that it's going to be twofold. One, I'm going to focus on my own self-care and self-awareness and learn more about my journey and how, secondly, I can give back to the sport and other people in a new and hopefully richer way, and pick projects that fit where I am in my life right now, including I deliberately didn't want to work for one full-time position. I wanted space to self-care, my son, my parents, my friends, all those things, kind of life over work. We always talk about work-life balance. It should be the other way around. It should be life and then fitting in work. And I've been really, really, really grateful and blessed to have some great opportunities to transition and work on projects that I can express what I've learned the last year or two, and also the skills and experiences I've had earlier in my career.
Have you ever read Joe Ehrmann's book, Inside Out Coaching?
No, I've heard of it. I have not read it.
I interviewed him, had him on the podcast a few weeks ago. I think it's 40 and 41.
Cool.
I think you'd really enjoy that.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite things that he said in our conversation is that if you want to transform the lives of others, you have to experience transformation yourself. And what you're talking about there resonates with me, just in the fact of, you went through this really difficult season, but you recognize how transformative it was for you. And now you're able to take that and share that with others because you experienced it first. And I think also it's worth highlighting what you said about the importance of just sharing your story. And I've found the same to be true in my own life, whether it's with coaching things, personal things. It's crazy what happens when you're willing to be honest and vulnerable and just say, this is what's going on. This is what's hard. I'm struggling with this. And so often the response is, oh, me too. Yeah, I get that. I've been there. Like you said, it's crazy, especially, with the people in life that we do have those deep connections with. Usually they lean in, and it can be scary to take that step and to be honest. But I found there's been very few times where I've regretted taking that step. And I think that's something that every coach needs to be considering is, who and where can I be really honest with whatever's going on in life. Maybe it's on your coaching journey, maybe it's your personal journey. I need to find someone or maybe a small group of people where we get really honest with each other. And partly just because it sometimes they'll also expose some blind spots, some things that you don't see. Because I'm sure you probably had some people say, Matt, have you considered this? Right? Or Matt, yeah, you're looking at it like that, but I think there's another way you could look at this. I think it's really, really important that we make a habit of being vulnerable and sharing open and honestly with other people, right? Maybe that are in the same spot or have been in the spot we're in.
Yeah. I mean, one word that I'm big on is mentoring. And, I don't think a mentor is over a mentee. It's give and take, but I would encourage, particularly young up and coming coaches, professionals, whatever role you're in, any time in life, who are your mentors is really important, and let them know that you want them to be your mentor. And if they have a big heart and they have some time for you, that's a beautiful thing. You can learn from others' journey. People like to share, their words of wisdom, their nuggets. And I'm happy to do that for anybody that's on the call. Something that really helped me too, it's a John Gordon thing, but kind of a one word. And he's big on having a one word. And for me, my one word for 2021 was love. And not from the romantic side. It was more based on self-care and self-compassion and self-kindness. And then when you do that, like you said, Luke, then you can experience and help others and serve others. But you've got to be internally focused to be ready and to be of service of others. This year, my one word is gratitude. Really, really thriving on gratitude to recognize the good things in my life, the blessings in my life, and showing gratitude and feeling gratitude is the ultimate disruption of anxiety and depression. It really is. And I have suffered, as I told you, from both anxiety and depression, with panic attacks. Flying is not a good thing for me, for example. I'm claustrophobic. And depression. So anxiety is obviously the stress of things going to happen in the future. We're always ruminating what could go wrong, what could go wrong. And depression is usually pain from the past or regrets from the past or shame from the past. So just trying to be present. I'm really into mindfulness. I meditate every day. A plug for Insight Timer, which to me is godsend and a great free website and app for those to check out with calming music, free meditations, free classes. live courses, really good stuff, Insight Timer. And for me, meditation is a perfect example of mindfulness, about focusing on the present, the here and the now.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that piece of self-care was something I wanted you to hit on. I'm glad you did there. It's so important that we find some routines, some habits, some space to fill our own cup up before we try to, fill the cups of others. Because, like we talked about, coaching is so demanding. It requires us to pour out and give so much, but you can't give from an empty cup. So I totally resonate with that. I'd love to talk a little bit more about what you shared around, you called it life and work balance, and how important that is, and maybe what boundaries do coaches need to be intentional about putting in place to actually make sure that their coaching journey doesn't destroy the rest of their life, right? To take it over and become all consuming.
Yeah, one of the mantras with Soccer Resilience, which is one of the projects I work on, is the idea of more than an athlete. And it goes with what you're saying, Luke, is we get so caught up in our identity with our job or being a parent like you are with your second kid come through, that we forget that we're a person first. So example of that, when I was a college coach at Davidson for 18 years, I tricked the guys one time. I said, "Are you guys soccer players first and foremost?" And they said, "Yeah, of course, coach." I'm like, "No, you're not. You're young men that love soccer and appreciate the sport in your life." And so coaches, and any job for that matter, with you and your podcast and you and your teaching, it can be so consuming. But coaches, they stare at the ceilings, they second guess themselves, they overthink things. And part of that's not their fault. I've really done a deep dive into psychology and recognized that we have about 80,000 thoughts a day. So our brain's always churning, which is a lot. Our brain is super busy, and it's amplified by modern technology, social media, pressure of email, pressure of always being on. All that is just state of flux. So I think I would encourage people to think about themselves first and their career second, more than we have in the past. We've all been so focused. Maybe it's an American thing, this idea of manifest destiny. We're always in an upward trajectory and we go, go, go. And we never say no. We never set boundaries. Even the idea of work, I think, needs to be looked at. I'm big into semantics, and you're an English teacher, and so is my dad. And this idea of workaholic is that a good thing? It rhymes with alcoholic. Like the idea of work ethic. What does work have to do with ethics? Hard work. Success has always got to be hard. No pain, no gain. All these things we grew up with. Some of it was commercialized or what have you. We need to shift that. We need to shift to enjoyment, gratitude, and hope. And realize, I mentioned this before we got on the podcast, this Sean Achor, Achor, I believe I spelled his name correctly. Incredible TED Talk. I encourage the listeners. He's a positive psychologist, and it's like 12 minutes long. I can send it to you afterwards, and you can put it in the liner notes if you want to. But he talks about the idea that we need to focus on happiness, and then that success will come from that, versus the other way around, which is focus on success, then we think will bring us happiness. But often it doesn't, because we're under so much pressure to get a bigger title and a bigger salary and a bigger house and a second car. It's never enough. And we're just over focusing on things. There's a great, I like the music by Dave Matthews Band, and there's a song called Jimmy Thing. And I'll paraphrase the quote in the song, something about everything we want is out there. Everything we need is in us. And so we have all we need, and we need to be just a little bit focused on, our gratitude, our blessings, and the good things that we have. And that'll interrupt that go, go, go mentality all the time.
Yeah, totally. So much power in what you're talking about there. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about that, and really where we need to prioritize our focus, and recognizing that we need to prioritize our own well-being and our life before our career. I think one of the really powerful things for coaches to do, and this is something I picked up from someone else, is just the power of writing your own eulogy and sitting down to think about, like, what do you want people to say about you at the end of your life? And I think for most of us, like, we don't really care. We're not going to want our record on our tombstone. And at the end of our life, when we're on our deathbed, we're not going to want our trophies surrounding us. I think we will really want people around us and those relationships to be rich and full. And so just to take time to, you hear it all the time in business, education, like start with the end in mind. Like we should be doing the same with our lives. This is what I want the end of my life to look like. And now the question is, well, what do I have to do right now to get to that future place? And I think for a lot of us, it means that we need to focus on the things we've been talking about more, making sure that we're in a good place so that we can give to others, so that we can serve others, so that we can create that life that we aspire to have at the end of our life, a life of deep meaning and purpose and relationships.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic, it's been horrible. It's also forced change on us. The hard parts for a lot of people, myself included, are three things, which is negative surprises. That could be a kid, having his whole basketball season canceled, or that could be a family not being able to do their annual trip to see their grandparents in Arkansas, wherever they live. All those negative surprises. And then secondly, with that kind of that isolation, that forced isolation, and humans are social beings. Like we want people around us. We want family. We want gatherings. We want events. We want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And then the just uncertainty of if it's going to end. We all thought this was going to be a marathon. It's not a marathon. Marathon has an end. And it's not, there's no finish line per se in this. It's with us for forever, a long time, whatever we don't know. And I think the layoffs and the recession and the work from home, all these things have made us do what you're talking about, Luke, is reevaluate and pivot to figure out what is important in life. And I think you're right that this idea of maybe I need to, slow down a little bit and do a little bit less. I'm big into minimalism, not only just stuff, like I'm just kind of tidy guy in general. Less stuff is easier for me, to the point where emails, like one of my favorite things is deleting an email. I mean, just less. And Greg McEwen, you probably follow him and know him, the idea of essentialism. What is really essential in your life? Boil it down to less. And then you'll have more quality. It's not about quantity, it's about quality of moments and stuff. And I really encourage people to it's kind of like that idea of we have all these tabs open on our computer and all these tabs open on our head, but we're never really fully engaged in any one of them. We're bouncing around a lot. And that's not mindful. That's mind space full, FULL. And so, and every study has shown that when we multitask, we don't get stuff done as good quality. So really focus on quality over quantity.
Yeah, and that's worth highlighting for not only your personal life, trying to be productive, get stuff done, focus on what matters most, with your team too. Like do less with your team, focus more. Like that is, we got to apply that everywhere. I think that's such an important point.
For coaches, I love all sports and basketball, particularly related to soccer, but other sports as well, any kind of team sport. I'll tell coaches that I was guilty of it. I'd have like 8 things to work on for a game or 6 things I want to tell them at halftime. I'm a big believer in the power of 3. Keep it to 3. Our memory doesn't go far beyond that. In kids, whether it be all the way college, even through pro, particularly high school kids and junior high, middle school kids, they can't stay connected. Our concentration levels are so minimal, so short and sweet. I always tell coaches when I do one-on-one mentoring is 3 things max you're working on that week or that practice or that halftime talk or that pregame talk, and make it short and succinct.
Yeah.
And don't get caught up in too much detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, I've got one more question for you and then a few rapid fire questions before we wrap this up. Considering the journey you've been on in the last couple of years and kind of the transformation you've experienced, I'm curious if you were to go back into coaching, if you were to be a head coach again at Davidson or somewhere else, what would you do differently knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would definitely big focus on the sports psychology side. There's kind of 4 pillars of coaching soccer and probably most sports in general. And they teach these things in all these coaching licenses, which are technical, tactical, physical, psychological. And I always feel like that 4th pillar, psychological, doesn't get a whole lot of attention. Why? There's a stigma with mental health. We don't know how to understand or teach the brain. We don't understand mindset. So we just avoid it. We go to what I call the hardware pieces of athleticism, which is the technical skills, the tactical understanding, positional elements, and then the physical athleticism. That's what we do as coaches. And that fourth piece, that psychological, is your software. So if your hardware is good, your software is not, when you come game day under pressure, you're just going to fold. So really focusing more on the psychological side. And that's why the sessions at this convention that I'm attending, there is more pieces of that moving forward. So being really holistic. As a coach, I early on added yoga, real nutritional focus, lots of team unity, shared aspirations. So I did a lot of these things, but I would really zero in more and more on the psychology. So example, it is my last year, 18th year Division I coach. I encouraged other coaches, pick an app or create your own Google self-assessment for your team. Every morning, have them do a self-assessment. What we did at Davidson, we used an app called Driven, Drivn. You have to pay for it. You can create your own. They had 5 questions every morning. Every athlete, every coach was, how many hours did I sleep? What was the quality of my sleep? 1 to 10, rate yourself on stress, fatigue, and soreness. That self-check-in is so important. Okay, I didn't sleep well. Why? Okay, I'm sore. Why?
Were you guys
Stressed.
getting that
Why?
information as the coaches?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we would monitor it. If we saw some low scores, bingo, let's check in. Luke, how you doing, man?
Yeah, that changes your interactions massively. Everything.
Totally.
Oh man, I know I got to connect with this kid.
Absolutely.
Oh,
What's
it makes
going
sense
on?
why this guy's struggling in practice today.
Totally. We may have to
So
back
stressed
off,
out.
do less,
Yeah.
take a day off, because otherwise we don't know. And if you just ask them verbally or try to look in their eye, you can only know so much. And so I would encourage self-check-ins for the coaches too. How are you doing? And I would also really harness things like gratitude. What are you thankful for? Why? The other big one, Luke, is purpose. Why do you play soccer? Why do you play basketball? Why do you play tennis? Understand that. Why do you coach those sports? So you're mission oriented. Every study is said time and time again that individuals, team organizations that have a clear mission and value system, they're going to outperform and outlast those that don't, because otherwise their confidence and awareness is super shallow. It's not going to be robust. They're not going to be able to handle tough times that happen to every single team.
Yeah. Got to have a purpose. Got to be connected to it. Matt, this has been awesome. I got 3 quick rapid fire questions for you, just reflecting on your coaching career. The first one is this: the most fun part of coaching is
Watching players smile and celebrate together.
I love it. I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
I wish I would have known that the players are people first.
That's so good. I know I'm successful as a coach when
I know I'm successful as a coach when players become so self-aware that they are not only self-driven, but they can tackle any challenge on their own.
That's so good. Matt, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time. Before we wrap it up, share with people where they can connect with you and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, Love United FC. I've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Those are really where I post things that I read and enjoy on my Facebook page, and then also affirmations and quotes and things like that on my Instagram page. My email address is Matt Spear, SPEAR 10, number 10 at gmail.com. Matt Spear 10 at gmail.com. I do one-on-one mentoring. I do team mental training sessions. I do organizational holistic well-being practices in and out of soccer and in and out of sports.
That's fantastic. Matt, again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Luke.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and thanks to Matt for joining me. You can find links to connect with Matt in the show details. And as always, if you enjoyed the episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast to download a free PDF of notes from this episode. And Coach, if you enjoyed this episode or enjoy the podcast in general, would you take a minute to either share this episode or the show with a coaching friend, leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, or give us a shout out on Twitter? It goes a long way in helping us share these conversations and ideas with more coaches, who then can ultimately go impact more athletes. And don't forget to check out summercoachingseries.com to learn more or get access to the 2022 Summer Coaching Series. That's summercoachingseries.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.